good afternoon. Is everybody ready for one more session before drinks? And as usual, this is called Save the Best for Last. This is a session about competing on analytics, and we have two speakers. Chantel Chase is going to lead off, and she has informed me that she's been a data scientist since actually way before the term really existed or was in vogue, since the 90s, which is completely...
Thanks for saying that, but yeah.
So let's get the basics right.
Definitely. This talk's going to be a little bit different than what you've been doing and listening to the whole day, and I hope that's okay with you guys. So I did promise one of my friends, Steve over there, that I would say this, which is if you feel like you need to stand up or move around a little bit, I know we're at the end of the day, so I will not be offended if you stand up, you stretch. I've raised two sons who were antsy and bouncing off their chairs, and I would always get irritated when the teachers told me, they gotta stay seated. You don't have to for this. So yes, I've been a data scientist for a long time, and what I wanted to talk about today was the insights. We're learning all about the data products, which are kind of the new and up and coming thing. We're cataloging our data. We have a lot of architecture discussions, engineering discussions, but what do you do when you get that data? Once you get it, how do you have really good information? And I wasn't planning on doing this, but I just feel compelled to do this for some reason today. So I like to keep things really super simple, bring things down to their basics. So in 1984, I was learning trig. And I had a teacher named Mr. King. He has since passed away. Sine, cosine, tangent. And you don't have to do this, but I'm just trying to share with you how I kind of like to keep things super simple. So sine is opposite over adjacent. So if I were measuring this, it would be opposite over adjacent. Over hypotenuse, excuse me. And then same for here, adjacent over hypotenuse, and then opposite over adjacent for tangent. The reason I'm telling you this is that's really complex information, and trigonometry isn't that simple. And in 1984, I was petrified until Mr. King said, don't worry, I'll make it simple so you can learn these complex things really easily. And I said, well, what do I do, Mr. King, because I still love math? And he said, it's just, think about it. Oh, hell, another hour of algebra. And in 1984, that's how I remembered it. And since then, I have learned it. So I hope that he sees me up in heaven and that the seeds he scattered for all the students who are here. But I want you to remember this. We like to keep things super simple. So you can make math and you can make data analytics really relatable. And that's what I want to do today. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about what we all know. I began work probably about around the time that chart started in 1986. I'm just going to write a couple things down, a couple ideas here. Really simple, keeping everything really easy. So in 1986, I would get a project, and I would analyze it, and I would take that data, and I would know it inside out, back of my hand. You could ask me anything about it, and I would know it. But then somewhere along my career, and this kind of does look like my career with data, it exploded. Today, we are creating 212,800,000 DVDs worth of data every day. We can't think as much as we need to about all of this data. And what is the important data? I'd like to say I created this brilliant chart, but I didn't, and I'm giving credit to the folks who did in the tag there. But the data explosion is real, which means our insights may not be at this point. Because just because you can calculate something doesn't mean you should. Doesn't mean it's going to be valuable. And how data explosions look like in real life is, I'm going to pick on my husband who's here with me today. He oftentimes just kind of goes along with some of the questions I ask him. And I can usually predict what he's going to answer, so I hope he's going to answer what I'm going to ask him to illustrate something. So Phil, I just want you to answer yes or no. Just don't give me any more information.
Anyone else could answer if they want.
Okay, so I know, he always feels like I interrogate him. Yeah. So Phil, just yes or no. When you were like 8 or 9 years old, did you have a phone in the house? Do you know that phone number? If I asked it to you, don't say it, but just yes or don't say it because we don't know. 8675? Okay. Yes, okay. Perfect. Okay, so I happen to know this morning on our way in, you called our oldest child. Yeah, okay, I know you did. I was there. so, so do you know his phone number? So he said, as long as I have my phone number, I knew you were going to say that. So he said, as long as I have my phone number, as long as I have my phone, I know his number. But you can't recite it to me right now, right? No, okay. So I'm going to let Phil off the hook because when we were growing up, I know for a fact, he had 5 people in his house. It was his mom, his dad, his aunt, his brother, and him. And they had 1 landline. Today, he's got 4 people in his household. And he has a work cell phone, a home cell phone, a personal cell phone, excuse me, a landline. I have a work cell phone, a personal cell phone, and our 2 sons have their cell phones. We have 2 young adults in the house. So there's 4 people and 7 phone numbers. He grew up, there were 5, and there was 1. That's what data explosion looks like. So do we have the right information? Not always. We don't always have the right information. So over the years, I developed a method, and I'm going to say I probably developed it I created this thing just to make it simple for me to do my job well. My job's important to me, and I want to do it well. So I call it the TAP method. And why we need this TAP method is because there's too much data now. So around 2002, 2003, I was experiencing this. I was saying, I can't keep up. I'm delivering a lot more data, but is it the right data? So using this method is super simple, guys, like really easy. And we want to use it because any good method should be transferable, predictable, scalable, repeatable. It's all of those things. So transferable, meaning I can use it to measure employee sentiment. I can use it to measure customer spend. Scalable, I can use this method to set a data analytics strategy for an organization, for my department, because I lead a data analytics department, or for an individual project. And we're all looking at data in some capacity, whether we work in data science or not. We're all looking at our data. So what does it mean? It's a pragmatic approach, and it stands for tools, analysis, and population. And you think that's really simple, right? You're like, this is super easy. Of course, we use tools, analytics, and population, but we don't always get it right. So I'm going to do a couple really easy, really relatable things that we've all experienced, but we can make this very complex if we need to. So one of the things we do, most of us have experience, is something called an engagement survey. Everyone works at a company here, and sometimes it's called an employee survey or a culture survey, the pulse. It has different names, but once or twice a year, a company survey goes out. And what we hope to do with these is gather data and then make some decisions. Maybe there's some gaps. When we get the data back, we analyze it, and there'll be some gaps. And we use this to sort of build up our company culture and our knowledge. And we'll ask questions like, I know what's on a scale of like disagree to agree, or 0 to 10. We'll ask questions like, I know what's expected of me. I have the materials I need to do my job. My organization fosters a culture of collaboration. Or conversely, we work in silos from disagree to agree. And we measure this. And then we develop these programs, right? This is kind of, we all do this. But remember, I like to keep things super simple and super easy because it really bothers me when it's not really easy for me to understand. So at its essence, I just want to say this, at its essence, an employee survey asks how happy you are. It asks how happy you are in your work environment, not at home or at school, right? But in your work environment, how happy are you? What's going on? How do you feel? How happy you are? And I'm just going to add this one little piece of data because I feel like it's kind of important. We all should know it. It's asked by the person who pays you. So we got to think about that, right? It's asked by the person who pays you. So that could be a problem with certain questions because studies tell us between 30 and 50% of people lie. on their surveys. 20% don't even respond. So we're working on this sort of marginal information, and we're developing our projects and our initiatives based on this information. So surveys are a tool. So remember, tools, analysis, and population. So we want to think about when we're measuring things, how the tool is one of the first things we think about. What are we measuring? And then we go the tool, the analysis, and the population. So I'm just going to tackle psychological safety because this is a big one and super important, particularly in, if you're in a hospital setting, you need a speak-up culture, you need to feel psychologically safe. If you're in a pharma organ, anywhere, psychological safety is critical. And what it basically means is, do you feel safe to speak up in a work environment without repercussions, without fear of negative impact to your job or promotability? Do you feel safe to speak up? And we ask people this on our surveys. We say, sometimes we ask directly, right? We'll say, do you feel safe to speak up on a scale of 0 to 10? Or, I know where to go to report a problem. Sometimes we ask a little indirectly, and we'll say, my manager lets me, values my opinion, or I can bring my authentic self to work. These are all sort of identifiers of psychological safety. We do those surveys, we send them out, we get the score, it's a 7. We high-five each other at the town halls, and we go, woo, remember, you can go, to this anonymous link on the HR internet, and we put a little link there as a reminder, and we're all happy, and we're all pretty good about it. So that's the tool we use, generally. All of us do. So I'm going to tackle it a little differently as an example. There's an IT department at Company A, and I love Company A here. Company A has 40 people in the IT department, 20 under Manager A and 20 under Manager B. By the way, everyone has the same psychological safety scores, same survey results, same everything in the IT department. But we have a 10% attrition rate, meaning turnover, people leave, voluntary. This is a voluntary attrition rate, and that's fine. But in the IT department, we have a 23, 24%. So we look at Manager A, and we notice that one person left for further education. They're going back for their bachelor's or master's or whatever. And somebody left for a promotion. That's reasonable. Fine. And that's 10%. So we're like, I don't know what's going on. But Manager B, we have 2 people left for lateral transfers, and I want to talk about that in a second. And then 5 people left. Again, no one said anything negative. They left for promotions. They left to be closer to home. Maybe they left for remote work. Everyone's pleasant. Everyone said everything's nice. Everything's good. But 2 people did leave for lateral transfers as well. Lateral transfer means they transferred out of your unit for the same job, same grade, same pay, same title, same. But they just said they wanted to learn a different part of the business. That attrition rate's way different. Maybe we didn't capture something on the tool we used for psychological safety. What could have gone wrong? We used the wrong tool. If we're using a tool that impacts your livelihood, and we're saying, I want you, say you work for a really toxic manager, and if we've all been in the work world, we've had one, unfortunately, who just isn't your supporter, your advocate, you're going to keep your head down, and you're not going to say anything. So why would we think that the victim, for lack of a better word, is going to report the bully to the bully, right? So wrong tool, we wouldn't do that. Instead, we would use things like HR complaints, attrition, lateral transfers. That would be a more appropriate tool. So we want to think about the tools. The next I want to talk about is appropriate analysis. Remember, tools, analysis, and population. We're going to go through this together. I know this looks old-fashioned, guys, and I'm so sorry. I still write checks, but I'm not the lady at the grocery store writing checks anymore. So I'm just using a checkbook as an example because it's really easy. I started my career as a mathematician, so I tend to think of things, I call them operations, and operations are addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, but it really is analysis. It could be predictive modeling and regression analysis, correlations, but it's just kind of an easy way. So in this case, I have $100 in my checking account, and I just wrote a check for $95 to a membership. The normal analysis I'll conduct is subtraction. And I have $5. So my insight, because we want to pull the right information, actionable insight, accurate information too. So I have $5 left in my checking account, which means I'm not going out to dinner this week. And in fact, I'm kind of laying low this week until my paycheck comes in. But I gotta tell you guys something. This past week, one of my colleagues taught me a really cool analysis, and it's called multiplication. And what's really fun about it is I like my answers better, and multiplication is like 5 syllables, right? Multiplication, 5 syllables. So it just sounds more important. I sound more important, and I like my number better, and my boss likes the number better too. And in fact, I had $100, I wrote a check for $95, but in using my new analysis, I now have $9,500. So I am going out to dinner tonight. Everyone can go out with me tonight. So analysis, and we don't think we do this, but we do. We still do this. So I'm going to go back to that company A. They have 5,000 people there. And we often do average tenure. This is kind of a normal thing. And in our company, we have an average tenure of 8.8 years. Kind of cool. So we're going to build out some initiatives to address that and kind of tackle our mid-career folks who've been there, they know the ropes. But another analysis was conducted. And what we did was we did this thing called stratification and bucketing. We use those words, they're kind of big, but they really just mean put them in buckets and then kind of see what the percentages lay out to be. And it turns out that we have 23% here who've only been here a year. And we have another 38 who've been here 1 to 3 years. In fact, we only have 11% between 4 and 10 years, which I said was the average tenure. And I was going to build the whole thing on that 11%. So I'm not even addressing the fact that I have, 61% here 3 years or less, which is where I should be spending my time, getting people onboarded accurately. Apparently it's a complex company, and we need to make sure they can navigate the complexities of the area. So we want to do that. We want to make sure that we have the right analysis. Here, the tool we used, just to go back to TAP, the tool we used was a database. So I should say that. So a survey would be something called primary data collection. And primary data collection would be, it's often perception data. It would be things like guided interviews, focus groups, surveys. Secondary data would be your HR databases, member databases. If you work in a hospital, your patient databases. Amazon probably has an enormous customer database. So pulling it from the right tool, conducting the right analysis will give you more accurate information. Does anybody know this picture? Has anyone seen this picture? Awesome, awesome. Okay. So Dewey defeats Truman. The Chicago Tribune posted this. They did use the right tool. They polled people. They polled them. So they used this tool called polling, and they did the analysis, which was also accurate. But what happened? Does anyone know? TAP, tools analysis, population, thank you. Population. It turns out, in 1948, not a lot of people had telephones. And this was one of the first telephone polls. The wealthy people had telephones, and they also identified as Republicans. So we got the population wrong. Even though we got the tool right, the analysis right, we got the population wrong. We got our insights wrong. So I said, how often does this really happen? Hopefully not that often. Peer-reviewed journals are sort of our gold standard. There's this thing called clinical trials, randomized clinical trials, and they're really the most methodologically sound types of analysis we can do. So these randomized control trials are set up, and Lancet published this one, and it's men and women, 35 to 70 years old, all with a previous diagnosis of myocardial infarction, and they did a longitudinal study. And they tracked them. And everything looks well and good. And I'm like, I'm not going to find any issues with this. And it's peer-reviewed, and it's perfect, so I think I'm good. But I'm a data scientist, and I always look at things. And so I kind of looked at the population, and it was men and women, and they were within this age bracket. But when I kind of broke it down, 4,444 people were in this clinical trial, of which for every 100 people, 18 were women. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a clinician. I do not claim to be one. I do want to share that I definitely have looked up hundreds of symptoms on WebMD, so I kind of sort of feel like a little bit, you know, like I kind of can, call me kind of sort of. I'm kidding, sort of. But I can look at data. I do know how to do that. And this really bothered me. So I ended up reading a little bit more about it. Women do metabolize differently. I don't build muscle as easily as my husband does. Medications do react differently to me. And it turned out the more I read, the more disturbed I was. NIH requested, suggested, recommended in 1989 that women be part of clinical trials. Then in 1993, they required it. I still think it's missing the boat. There's some underrepresentation. So we want to make sure that our tools and our analysis, and this is definitely not to pick on the medical community, which is fabulous, and I rely on them for my health. But we want to look at things. Are we underrepresenting a population? Are we missing one? I think in some cases we are. So every aspect, what I've learned over the past, and the cool thing is I have been working for like 30 years, and I'm talking for 30 minutes, so I feel like you guys are getting a lot of bang for your buck, because in 30 minutes, you're gonna get 30 years worth of my failures and my successes, so it's like 1 minute per year kind of thing, so it's kind of cool. So over the years, I realized every time I got something wrong, whether it was the tool, the analysis, or the population, I skewed my results and my insights were off. For psychological safety, for example, I had the tool wrong, the analysis was accurate, and the population was accurate. Remember, it went to the whole organization. But that's an overestimation of psychological safety because people aren't going to report it. It's an underreported thing. So we can't look at it that way. We have to look at it through attrition, through people's feet. We have to listen to the data. We can't analyze, and it's not a primary data collection method. Tenure. You get uninterpretable results when you do the wrong analysis. And then finally, with medical administration, if we skew our populations or we miss them, it would be something egregious like we study men for pregnancy. You're not going to get any good results there. So we're going to skew our populations and potentially, hopefully not, but it's not good to do that. The last example I'm going to give you, I love this example because I learned so much from it, depending on how I turn it and twist it and look at it. But I feel like this example, they simultaneously, the first time, got everything wrong in TAP, and then they got everything right. So during World War II, Allied bombers were being lost at an alarming rate. 50% of the men in the airplanes were downed, were lost. The commanding officer said, we gotta ground these returning aircraft, and we have to study them. So that's the tool, these grounded aircraft. And they studied them. The analysis was they found bullet holes riddled in the wingtips, the fuselage, and the tail. They talked to the pilots. What do you think? What do you see? What do you think's going on? It turned out that they decided through that initial analysis that they would reinforce the wingtips, the fuselage, and the tail, where all the bullet holes are. No effect. Saved 0 more lives. Abraham Wald was a statistician at the time, and he said, you got it all wrong, and you have it all backwards. We actually want to do the whole fleet, not just the returning aircraft. So we do have to make some assumptions. We have to look at the whole fleet of airplanes, and I realize some are missing, so there's some statistical assumptions being made. Then we have to do analysis. And I'm just simply going to say that X is the wingtips, the fuselage, and the tail. And that was the analysis. We want to do 1 minus X. 1, the whole aircraft, minus the wingtips, the fuselage, and the tail. What happens when it hits the cockpit? What happens when it hits the engine? What happens when it hits the areas that are not riddled with bullet holes? And when they reinforce the unscathed, pristine, unriddled areas, they saved countless lives. So I want to just share that with you. And I think when we use TAP, when it goes wrong, right? I showed you when it goes wrong. Let me see if I can do this. I had this in my head, and I don't know if I can do this or not, so play with me for a second here. When we get it wrong, we get confusion. We have inaccurate information. Let's see if I can take this off. I'm just going to rip this off. We have wrong conclusions. We have wrong information. We have wrong insights. And we have useless strategic plans. We're making decisions based on pictures we're drawing with data because we didn't get it right. So what my senior leaders are saying is, oh, these are the results, Chantel. Maybe you can make this one smile a little bit more. Maybe this one couldn't be looking off to the side so much. But when we get it right, we get accurate information, actionable insights, we get impactful strategic plans. We're not drawing pictures with our data. We're actually having accurate information that's useful that we can use. So I hope you saw the little faces in that. Did you? Did you guys see the faces? Maybe a little bit. So that's it for today for me. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always up for talking about data, or even if you want to talk about how to best look at your data, or hey, Chantel, we want to measure this. We can hash that out because there's some ways that are really good and there's some ways that are really poor. There's high lying rates on surveys for certain questions. So we got to tackle it looking at our secondary data sources. So I hope you found this useful. Thank you so much, guys.
Looks like we have just under 5 minutes for questions for Chantel. We'll see what that's up.
Okay.
Questions?
Any questions, guys?
I'll ask you a question. What are your tips for figuring out whether you're using the wrong tool
If
for
I'm
analysis of the population when you're doing it?
So different questions have different types of data. If I'm doing, if I'm doing really quantifiable data, how long you've been somewhere, what's going, so sort of that really hard science data, you're most likely generally going to go to a secondary data source, meaning your databases. How much money does Chantel spend on Amazon? And if they ask me how much money I spend at Amazon, I'm going to tell you, I don't know, not that much. That's the survey tool, my perception. So that's opinion data. My opinion in this case is going to be a little flawed and a little biased. But if Amazon uses the Amazon database and they calculate my spend, they're going to get a far more accurate number. So it just depends on your metric, your measurement. And I think what's really important is because we are now producing, like my unit alone, we produce thousands of data points every single day. Because we have so my unit is a data analytics unit, and we have live dashboards that have live feeds from IT and countless slicers in our dashboards. So thousands of data points every day. And what I want to do is have us focus a little bit on the insights, a little bit more. What is meaningful information for us to use? So that's kind of the critical space that I think we have so much, and I'm often say I'm agnostic to the tool. I've been in my career long enough that I've used proprietary types of data warehouses. I've used different, coding in R or Python or SAS or SPSS or C++. So it just Fortran. It just depends on. The tool doesn't matter. The data, the insights are what matters. The information that it's accurate, that you've measured it accurately. And I did share a few of those. Those are real. The psychological safety one really bothers me over the years. I've had friends who've had really toxic managers. And so I've even done interviews on how to measure psychological safety, because that's one that I think we should never have to deal with. If we get it right, we can pinpoint it. We can pinpoint the areas of pain. So yeah, that's kind of it, guys. But feel free to ask me anything. Does anyone have any last questions before I turn over the floor? No. All right, thank you so much,
Thank you
guys.
again.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it.